Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com presents the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. PerformBetter.com.
All right, hey everybody, welcome to episode 394 of the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. I'm your host, Anthony Renner. The show notes are located at strengthcoachpodcast.com. All right, today we got our end of the year episode with Coach Boyle, so a little extra time. We kind of do this every year with him, and this is actually kind of how the show is going to go from now on. Actually, in February, I am going to be turning this into a video podcast. So I'm playing with the idea of doing just Coach Boyle's segment twice a month, and twice a month doing an interview with a strength coach. So there'll be 4 episodes a month, and it would just alternate between Coach Boyle and a strength coach. So right now, obviously, we do everything on one show, but I'm thinking about switching it up in February as we turn into a video podcast. But you never know, things could change. I'm just going to play with it for now, get some feedback from you guys and see how it goes. So today on the strengthcoach.com and NBSC.TV Coach's Corner, I spoke to Coach Boyle about programming first, and we talked about why he likes 3 days a week programs over 4 days a week. It's kind of something that he's really gravitated towards at NBSC. Why he uses core exercises in trisets over stretches. So he used to, a while back, there was definitely more stretches in there. The lack of carries in his program, so he adds a lot of core exercise, but lots of planks, etc. So I wanted to ask him about that. We talked a little bit about vertical pressing, because I didn't see a lot of vertical pressing in some of the programs that he was going over, or that they posted on strengthcoach.com, on Twitter. So I wanted to ask him about that. And we talked about a post from Dr. Howard Lux, which is really good, great explanation of cardiac adaptations from weight training. And I wanted to see if that's changed the way Coach Boyle has maybe done some things or reinforced some things. And I finished up asking him about something he's learned this year, or the biggest change. Sometimes those two go hand in hand. So he's going to talk about that. Guys, Perform Better is having, or actually they extended their holiday sale to January 7th. So remember, up to 50% off over 100 items, including dumbbells, kettlebells, plyo boxes, bumper plates, racks, barbells, sandbags, med balls, much more. Great time to buy or restock on stuff at Perform Better. They also have a rewards program. So you sign up, you create an account, and you'll earn 50 points right away. And then every time you shop, you earn points, and you can redeem those points for exclusive rewards. So you get points for joining, you get 25 points for following them on Instagram, 50 for writing a product review, and they'll even send you 100 points on your birthday. So you can check it all out at performbetter.com. Lots of things to get to, so let's get on the phone with Coach Boyle. All right, guys, now it's time for the strengthcoach.com and NBSC.TV Coach's Corner with Coach Boyle. Strengthcoach.com articles, videos, one of the longest running forums in strength and conditioning and fitness. You can try strengthcoach.com out 7 days for free. Go to strengthcoach.com to start your trial. Also, NBSC.TV, you're basically a fly on the wall at NBSC with staff meetings, programs, seminars, in-services from top coaches. You can try it out for 7 days for free at NBSC.TV. Coach, how you doing?
I am doing great, Anthony. How are you? Happy New Year. We're last day of the year.
Yeah, last one. And we're going to do like what we normally do, like just you and I for this one. We'll talk about some different topics, and then kind of get into maybe some of a little bit of a year in review. But first, I owe you an apology for, now you didn't know I called you an idiot, but Mike, so somebody talked about music, and they were talking about something. You were like, yeah, Linda Ronstadt, all her songs are covers. I'm like, what's wrong with this guy? There's no way. I look up Wikipedia, I just looked up the 2 greatest hits albums. She didn't write one of those songs. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe it. I was shocked. Crazy.
It's really funny. I can't think of one that she did. Maybe You're No Good might have been original, but other than that, I don't know if there was any, that'll be the day. It was Buddy Holly. Like, I could go down the list,
Yeah.
all covers. So I'm
A lot
not
of,
an idiot. You just think I'm an idiot. That
there you go. There
is
you
a
go.
bit different. Is the other area in which I am a little bit knowledgeable, along with strength and conditioning, and then a teeny bit of carpentry.
There you go. Mike, also, Alex Hughes did your 12 days of Christmas on his 12th day. He did some rear foot elevated split squats. But I got to call it, did he have, you guys have pink dumbbells there? Were those 3-pound dumbbells? Did you see that video?
He did. He picked up the. I almost wanted to comment. We do. I think those are twos, actually. And I believe we must have gotten them at some point for the baseball guys for some shoulder rehab exercise. So he did, in fact, get the smallest possible dumbbell that you could pick up in there. I don't know why.
I figured
He could have done them with his sneakers in his hands.
had to give him some shit for that one. Coach, let's go into the programming. I got a bunch of questions on this one. You've really kind of gravitated towards a 3-day program. You said you like why I like them. Even Chris Beardsley, strength and conditioning research, said the weekly net stimulus model suggests that full body programs are unbeatable, even when compared to the very popular upper and lower split routine. Talk to us about why you've really come to like the 3-day programming.
Well, one, Anthony, you have to realize the split system is actually the way to go, because there's a bunch of guys on Twitter who've not trained anybody who are absolutely convinced that they're correct. And I like to argue with them. So I should probably just stop now and realize that some guy who trains himself in his garage knows more than I do. That's why one of the guys, I literally asked the question today, who have you tried this on? Because he was saying, this really works. And I was kind of like, my thousands of clients against you, maybe? But so, no, what was happening for me is, and I tried to explain this, Twitter is a tough medium to explain it in, but particularly when we started looking at posterior chain, like I talked about the idea of kind of what we talked about, like our big 4 unilateral exercises in terms of one leg squat, skater squat, one leg straight leg deadlift, slide board lunge. Slide board lunge almost always gets cut because there just isn't a slot for it. Then you start going to posterior chain and you realize you want to do some sort of hip lift, hip bridge, something along that line. You want to do some sort of slide board leg curl type of motion. You want to do some sort of, again, the one leg straight leg deadlift we want to have in there. You want to have some sort of Nordic iso, something along the line of that Nordic. And you just start realizing there's too many lower body exercises to do over 2 days. And really, when you start talking about 4-day programs, you're talking about 2 lower body days. And just by their nature. So I just started looking, thinking, hey, if I really want to get all of these things in that I think are important, I'm going to be able to do that much more easily at 3 days than I am at 4. And it's the same way in terms of if I want to get in just, a conventional bench press, some type of incline bench press, maybe a close grip bench press, things like that. All of it tends to lend itself better to 3 days than it does to 4 days. Because when you're in 4 days, you're really talking about 2 days per, I would prefer to say per muscle group than per body part, because I don't want to bow down to the body part people. But no matter how you look at it, it's 3 exposures per week per body area compared to 2 exposures per week per body area. And then the thing that flips it even more heavily for me is it gives our athletes 2 days off to do more of the sport related stuff that they're doing. There's so much more sport related things that are going on. And I did say this, I think, in one of the podcasts, when we started this training program 25 years ago, there was very little going on besides strength and conditioning. There was not all these summer skates and 7-on-7 and lacrosse, night leagues that the guys are playing in. Now everybody's got something going 1 or 2 days a week at least, in addition to what they're doing with us. So I think it becomes kind of, in some ways, it's less is more because it's 3 days versus 4. And then in some days, it's more is more because it's 3 exposures versus 2.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, I personally again, with my demographic, I love the total body. And I think, because I'll kind of go back and forth between 2 and 3 days with people. So it works better and we get everything in and we go from there. So, Mike, what about some pros?
Let me back up one
Yeah,
step. Because the
sure.
other thing that you realize is that when you start talking about body part work, that's why there's always the joke, don't skip leg day, right? If you look at the average person you're training in a normal gym now, there's a lot of people in there that skip their lower body days. And it's really easy to go in and say, oh, I'm going to do chest today, I'm going to do back today, and I'm going to do body, do arms tomorrow. And then, leg day, maybe I'll just probably, I don't know, I'm going to be busy that day. And then I'll hop back in and get another chest day in. So when you say to somebody, we're going to do total body workouts, it means they're doing lower body work. It means they're doing upper pull work. It means everything is getting done and you're not relying on kind of the best intentions of these trainees. Sorry, that was just my
No,
last.
you're right. You know who doesn't miss leg day in the big gym? Women.
Right.
They do not. They will. Sometimes they're doing it too much. I'm like, does she do have legs every day? I mean, it's crazy. But then you see plenty of men who don't do it. Coach, pro athletes, elite athletes, off season, if they're going to want to do 6 days, like you said, great point about, which is something that kind of reaffirmed for me this year was, just myself getting out on the ice, is when you play some of these short-sided games, there is nothing like that to get your heart rate up. Like I can go on the bike, I could sprint by myself, which I was doing, but man, once you're around other people and you're playing some, like even just a little scrimmage or whatever, half the ice, whatever it is, man, your heart rate gets up. So what do you like if guys are going to want to be in the off season, are you going to go 3 days and then say, okay, try to get this much cardio in on your own, or you guys come in and do like long
With
days?
our pros, we stick to the 4-day, truthfully.
Okay.
It makes more sense. It just, it, it, it works out better for kind of that short-term person that you're going to have from, maybe you're going to see them once a year for 8 weeks or 10 weeks. Then you might be better off seeing them 4 versus 3 versus when I'm looking at, and I think that's where you get into the population. I start looking at Mark, my son, and his friends and realizing they're going to probably float much more between 3 and 2 and probably not go for the 4. But because the pro athlete doesn't have the ability to kind of practice their sport, play their sport as much in the summer, probably as a college kid does. So, but again, we find our pro hockey guys, I would say they'll skate 2 days a week in addition to everything that they do with us on average.
Okay. Yeah.
Some guys more. There's some guys who really are really into getting on the ice and skating and they never want to stop. And those guys might be going 4 times a week in addition with us.
Mike, just looking at some of the programs, you posted one on Twitter, one on strengthcoach.com on the forum, and just kind of going over some of this stuff. And I know some of them were one was for adults, but we have the typical Mike Boyle template. But when you're pairing those strength exercises, it seemed like you were doing a lot of core with those. So your trisets included, 2 exercises and a core exercise, a lot of planks, it seems like. Just talk about that. No more stretches. Will you pair them with stretches or with the older guys?
We haven't been pairing with stretches at all. We've been trying to fit the core stuff in. So I think, and it's funny, Eric Cressy tends to call them fillers, and fillers probably is a good name. Rest extenders might be another good name in terms of you're looking at it and saying, let's just say we're looking at a typical kind of day where we might be pairing. I think our pairing right now in the 3-day is bench press, trap bar, deadlift. And so if I want to extend that rest, I can stick some sort of plank variation in there, whether it's plank reaches or bear plank shoulder taps or whatever it is. And really what I'm just doing is getting people to slow down a little bit, but I'm filling that space with something that's going to have some value, something that I probably am not going to be able to get in somewhere else. So it is literal filler sometimes, but valuable filler.
Yeah. And I think with the stretches, one thing that I've found is it's really hard to kind of like, they'll kind of half-ass the stretches, you know, they'll sit there and, you know, just kind of do it half-ass, not like they're, you know, unless you're on top of them, and, you know, so it really just ends up being the rest period,
Yeah.
extended rest. But
It does depend. Sometimes, I mean, we'll do some stretches too in the summer with our pro hockey guys, and they tend to be good about stretching because they're so conscientious about their hips.
yeah,
But we will fit in sometimes some upper back, lat type stretching, things like that. And then, but I would say in general, it probably leans a little more towards core stuff.
yeah,
And sometimes when we're doing a little bit more basic programming, it may just be pairs and not even trisets, where it's just 2 exercises and let's just
yeah.
get this done.
Yep. Like, what about, I didn't see a lot of carries in any of the programming. I saw one a week. Is that because it's like you said, the extended rest and carries
Well,
more?
it's that, and it's just carries are not convenient in our setting, really.
Okay. That's
So
what
you end up in a situation where you can have people walking all over God's creation, carrying stuff around, and it doesn't lend itself well to how we program because we don't have an area. We're sprinting in our sprint lanes. So even sometimes they'll program carries in the adult program, and then we'll have a time now like we have a lot of college athletes around, and it gets to be a problem because you've got people who are used to walking up and down the sprint lanes doing their farmers carries or their suitcase carries or whatever it is, and suddenly we've got kids sprinting. And so even now we've started to play with some more kind of in place versions of marches in place with carries and some of that stuff. But I think a lot of that stuff you look at and say the the carries and the core and the stretches, those are things that are extra that are going to fall by the wayside when you really start to pare stuff down. So particularly if you've got a 3-day program, one of the problems is you've got more lower body stuff that you want to get in. One of the other problems is that you don't have as many slots to plug core stuff in. So you are giving up. One of the reasons I used to always say I liked the 4-day workout was if we're doing, let's just say we're going to do 7 movements per day. Over a 4-day workout, that's 28 movements that we'll get in. But it might only be with 7 each day. It might only be 6 lower body exercises that we're getting in across that 2-day. Whereas in the 3-day, we might get 9 lower body movements in, but we're only going to get 21 slots. So we're losing 3 slots, and things that you would say are, I guess, less essential, they kind of don't make the cut.
Yep. Mike, I also did not see a lot of dumbbell press. So for me, with my clientele, I still program dumbbell press. It's usually just one arm to kind of make sure they have a little bit more range of motion and, you know, it's a little safer. But I'll also do like kind of a medium to high incline bench to kind of not to substitute it, but just to kind of get it closer, or a landmine press. Can you explain why there is?
Exact same answer. It's
Okay.
just another one of those areas where you look and think the horizontal stuff, particularly for our athletes, is going to be probably more important than overhead. So generally in that 3-day workout, there might be one overhead press movement and there might be like an alternate dumbbell press. So you're going to get one where you're really going purely vertical. And then usually there'll be, like you said, there'll be one incline in there. And then generally there'll be 2 horizontal presses. If we're looking at those areas and saying, okay, we're getting, again, we go back to this idea of having kind of 21 slots, right? And so, and maybe it could be 24, depending on if we're tri-setting or pairing or whatever it is. But it's usually like our power stuff is usually a power exercise done with some kind of core exercise. So you've got 2 in that block. Then you've got 3 in the block below and sometimes 3 in the block below that. So it could even be 8. But those slots get eaten up pretty quick when you're sitting there. I always think it's like a little puzzle game where you're trying to look and think, okay, I've got this list of 20 things or 15 things or whatever it is that I want to get done during the week in terms of I want to get some type of chin up. I want to get some type of row. I want to get some type of vertical press or some type of horizontal press. Or maybe I want to get 2 horizontal presses. And then I want to get, there's at least 2 knee dominants that I want to get in there, and then there's at least 3 hip dominants that I want to get in there, and suddenly you realize, wow, I've eaten up those slots pretty quickly. And when I have a few less, it is things like you said, carries may get pushed by the wayside, overhead press may get pushed by the wayside. Some things that you think, all right, these are less essential, almost has like a reverse redundancy to it, because it's kind of either essential or it's not. So you can't really say something is less essential, but you kind of look at things and say, these are things that we have to compromise on.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, sometimes they just have they're still a priority, but some have a higher priority. So,
Right. Yeah. That's
Coach,
probably a good way to put it.
the great post by Dr. Howard Lux, weight training versus aerobic training, or both. It's the cardiac adaptations that matter. He said weight training, resistance exercise creates pressure overload, leading to concentric hypertrophy, where the heart walls thicken, but the chamber size remains unchanged. Aerobic exercises causes volume overload, resulting in eccentric hypertrophy, where the chamber enlarges while the walls thicken slightly. This is why we need to combine bone resistance and aerobic training. Weight training strengthens muscles and metabolism, but lacks the heart chamber adaptations of aerobic exercise. Adding aerobic training enhances arterial health, lowers blood pressure, and boosts heart efficiency. You felt like this was a good explanation. Mike, is this kind of changed anything that you're like this idea? I know it's not that this isn't like the aha for you, but this idea about more aerobic for just really for health and for the stuff. Has anything changed with you for that?
No, that part hasn't changed, but I think it gives you the explanation. What happens is that explains why people will see high heart rates from lifting and assume that they're becoming more cardiovascularly fit. I think that's the reason I wanted to highlight that, because if we look at strength training, you would look and say chin-ups are really good for your cardiovascular system, because if you go on and do a set of chin-ups, you're going to jack your heart rate up above 80%. And people would look at that and say, wow, chin-ups are great aerobic work. And the reality is they're not great aerobic work, because as he said, it's that pressure that you're building. It's a different type of stress on the heart. Both of them are causing the heart to beat faster. But this is where you get into, is the heart filling? And that's where you get into even the kind of the whole zone 2 idea, in terms of, if you get too high, then you're beating too fast and the heart isn't filling. And that's why some people, that's why even too much HIIT, at least in theory, isn't good. But what we've realized, and a lot of this was kind of through some long talks with Charlie Weingroff too, is that it's sort of partially true, because yes, you're getting those really high heart rates. Let's say, like for me, when I get up at 170, there's no way I'm filling my ventricles at 170 beats a minute, but I'm getting the quality of work that I need during my rest. Because as I'm coming down, let's just say that when I drop below 150, now I start to get a full volume, and I get I kind of get that zone 2 sort of pumping action. So I do think some of the HIIT stuff gives you best of both worlds, but I don't think weight training does. That's why somebody said the other day, oh, just grab a kettlebell and that'll solve the problem. I said, no, it won't solve the problem, because it's still strength training. It's not solving the problem, but it's probably closer. I do think this kettlebell swings might be somewhere in the middle, if we started to look at that and say, because there's sort of the either or. There is the zone 2 of where you're getting that nice, like, boom, boom, bill, empty, and then you're getting the strength training part where you're not getting that. You're not emptying, and you're probably not filling, so you're kind of in between. And then you get the HIIT part where you're clearly not filling, but you're pumping at a really high rate. And it kind of goes back to that Andy Galpin idea. And I loved Andy Galpin. I think it was on the Huberman podcast, where he talked about the idea of, hey, at some point, you really want to kind of max out the engine. You want to rev that sucker up high as it can go. At other points, you want to work in the middle end. At another point, you want to work at a lower intensity. And I think that's the part that we have to get people to understand. So it goes back, right? We're back to the bucket filling thing. What you probably need to do is what you're not doing and what you're not good at. That may be in some cases, like I know it is for me. For me, it's longer, low intensity, but not walking. Because I get lots of that sub 100 heart rate time in, which I don't think is all that beneficial. What I don't get is that 100 to 140, that zone 2. So zone 2 is important for me. As much as I dislike it, as much as I don't do it, I know if you said to me, what do you need to do more of? I need to do a little bit more low intensity work. I need to get out and just ride the bike and not ride it competitively and not ride intervals. But if you looked at the average person, I think it's the opposite. I think the average person doesn't kind of redline the engine every now and then. The average person doesn't push the high end. And then you get some people who just lift and think, oh, it's enough because I'm getting my heart rate up. And it's like, no, it's really not. You're not getting any of the effects that you actually need. And the primary effect you're getting is a muscular one that makes you look good, but probably doesn't make you function well.
Yeah, and he did say too much aerobic, same thing, dangerous. Just, if you're just doing that, that's dangerous too from a health perspective.
Yeah.
And
And too much steady state aerobic. I remember that when they talked about years ago when Jim Fix died.
yeah,
And one of the things that they said when they started to study those endurance athletes is that people who just get out and go kind of anaerobic threshold for a really long time, so they get really good, let's just say, at that 160, boom, 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 and they can do that for hours at a time. That isn't good either. You really do. It's kind of like, and Dan Cleather blew this up the other day about the force velocity curve idea. I don't know if you saw that, but you want to surf through those zones. You don't want to be doing any one of them exclusively or at the exclusion of the others.
yeah,
And you want to be able to look and say, what am I getting too much of? And what am I getting not enough of? And that's really, you just keep going back. That's why I love the bucket analogy. Always kind of, I always, Brendan and these guys it's always back to the buckets, right? And it is always back to the buckets.
yeah,
Because what we're trying to do with our MBSC program, our CFSC program, our Thrive program, whatever you want, the programs that we're running is do a good job of looking at those buckets and saying, hey, what I really would probably like is to see all these buckets at 3/4 all the way across in terms of, there's a warm-up bucket and it's 3/4 full, and there's a power bucket and it's 3/4 full, and there's a strength bucket and it's 3/4 full, and there's a conditioning bucket and it's 3/4 full, as opposed to looking and saying, hey, my conditioning bucket's overflowing. I got conditioning all over the floor here. It's a mess. And gee, my warm-up bucket, totally, it's dry as a bone, nothing in there. So we've got to be able to look at those buckets and realize that getting the right amount of fill in every bucket is really where you're going to be at your best, probably at your healthiest anyway.
yeah, yeah. Andy put it a great way. Once a week, get that heart rate up as high as you can. Once a week, try to be in the middle. And he said the rest of the week, try to keep it at the zone 2, whatever.
Right.
And Dr. Luck said in the post, somebody asked, is a 17-minute mile walk good enough? He said yes, because a lot of the research was based off of just walking. It wasn't on a bike doing zone 2 or anything like that. So that's where a lot of it comes from. That's what he said in the Twitter post. But he did say, I'm not a cardiologist, I'm a orthopedic guy. But so take that with a grain of salt, he said. But
yeah, I mean, because I think the average 3 miles an hour is 20-minute mile.
Yeah, yep,
and
that's pretty slow.
3 miles an hour is a pretty good walk.
Yeah, yeah.
You get on a treadmill and set it at 3 miles an hour. I mean, you're not.
Yeah.
You're not power walking or speed walking, but you're moving along.
Yep.
Good. So 17-minute mile. But I know for me, I just don't, with the way my body is and my knees are, I don't move well enough to move at that pace for that length of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm better off. I'm much better off on a road bike. We've got some cruiser bikes that we ride, but again, we don't ride them probably 5 months out of the year.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's cold here and it's kind of crappy. So that's where your stationary bike comes in handy.
Yep. Mike, finish up here, last 2 minutes. These go together a lot of times. Something maybe you learned this year that kind of, and your biggest change. So maybe if you learned something, usually you're making that change. So
Well, funny you asked me, we talked about it. It's really, if you looked at it, it's the 3-day a week thing.
oh,
Because
wow.
I've really become a fan as I've gone along. I would look this, and I had this conversation with somebody the other day. If I was starting our business over again, I would have 3-day programs Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and 2-day programs Tuesday, Thursday. And that's how I would program it.
Ooh,
But
okay.
I don't know if that's a good business model. Our 4-day a week business model that we've always used is probably a much better model than the 3-day a week model. But if someone said, hey, you get a chance to start over, I might say, yeah, Tuesday, Thursday, we'll have all our 2-day people in there, all our middle school kids, younger kids who don't necessarily want to be there 3 days a week. And then we'll really sell the heck out of the Monday, Wednesday, Friday 3-day week program. But it's interesting, and everybody's response, I kind of threw that out there on Twitter too. And Sean Skane was saying, I don't know if that had float in Minnesota, Friday's cabin time, people want to get out of there on Friday. So I think from a summer business standpoint, we've become really well adapted to the Monday through Thursday kind of program that we've been doing for 27 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously a lot is influenced by the original piece of being a coach, a strength coach who working with athletes, right?
Right. That's where it all starts. It all started with college athletes. So that would be the biggest change. And then the other thing is just the sprinting thing. I'm becoming more and more of a fan where I realize it really matters if we are sprinting and jumping. And I almost am thinking the strength training stuff now becomes really secondary.
Wow.
I would never, that would be just blasphemy of the highest level
Yeah.
years ago, but I'm
Yeah.
really starting to believe that.
We'll have to expand on that on the next episode. I'll let you go, Coach. I know you got a call. So happy New Year. Thanks for doing this, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks for everything you do.
All right, that's going to do it for episode 394 of the Strength Coach Podcast, the last episode of the year. Guys, the show notes are located at strengthcoachpodcast.com. Don't forget, you can try strengthcoach.com and NBSC.TV out for 7 days for free. Special thanks to Chris Poirier and the folks over at Perform Better. Remember, they extended the holiday sale until January 7th, 50% off over 100 items. Don't forget the rewards program. You sign up, you get points right away. You earn those points every time you shop, and you can redeem them for exclusive rewards. Check it all out at performbetter.com. Thanks to Coach Boyle for sharing his insights and philosophies into the world of strength conditioning and performance enhancement. Thanks to Vince Gabriel and Sumit Seth, who've been part of the segments all year. Really appreciate those guys and all the content that really they brought. The content and knowledge that they brought to the show. Appreciate them. Thanks for listening, guys. It's been a great year. I appreciate all of you. I appreciate all the feedback. I'm Anthony Renna. Thanks for listening, and I'll speak to you next time.